Welcome to Scott Bryson Beyond the Service. Today, I am super excited to bring you an exciting guest. I say that every week because I have some interesting people, but this is the guy that moves the needle for me. No offense to any other guest I've had. They're near and dear to my heart, like Eric and Laura Trump, love them to death. Carl Higbee, of course, is a stud. This guy's name is Nic McKinley. He's a former PJ and a CIA operative, and we're so excited to have him. Nic, thanks for coming to the show, buddy.
Hey Scott, thanks for having me, man. I'm excited that I get to be in the presence of folks like Carl. I've been on his show a couple of times. Yeah, Carl's a good people. I like him,
Yep.
even
Carl,
if he was a Navy guy.
that's okay. We don't
We
hold
won't
that
hold that
against him.
against him.
Listen, I wasn't even in the military, so I can't jump in on those arguments. But I know Carl through Eric, and I've been knowing Carl since 2017. He's great. Um, just wanted to. I know we talked a little bit off camera. We're going to try to keep this to an hour. You have a lot of stuff we could talk about for 2 or 3 days, but we're going to keep it to an hour because I know you're busy, and I do appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule for us. Before we get started, if you could, within maybe like a minute, maybe 2 minutes, just a short overview of who you are, where you're from, and anything you want the audience to know, and then we'll just get right into it.
Well, I'm a pretty nonlinear guy. My resume is kind of all over the place. I started out just a kind of normal, average Americana childhood up in Montana. Pretty blessed. Can't complain about the way that I was raised up here. But then, what every small town kid wants is to get out of the small town and go see the world. And then once you see the world, you can't wait to get back to the small town, which is why I'm back in Montana. But the short story is, after high school, I decided that I didn't want to go to college. I wanted to go do cool stuff. And I joined the Air Force specifically to be an Air Force pararescueman, which is the Air Force's one of the Air Force's ground special operations components. I did that for 11 years, 10 years in active duty, and then 1 year in the Guard and Reserves. And I left, did some a couple of years in kind of the private equity community, solving problems for insanely wealthy investors and doing private personal recovery, basically just solving problems when they didn't really know who to look at and who to ask. They asked this young 27-year-old kid right out of the military. That's kind of how broken the system was. I was their best and worst option all at the same time. Decided that wasn't really for me, and at the same time had a few conversations with the Central Intelligence Agency, and I ended up working for them after that. And can't say how many years I worked there for, but cumulatively, my total service came to 17 and a half years. And then I left to found a number of different companies, just like everybody who leaves government service. I worked 5 different jobs in the beginning. The big thing that I really wanted to do was to solve the child trafficking crisis in America. And I also built a early stage due diligence tech company. And then currently I run a nonprofit, DeliverFund, which is the nonprofit that set out to seek to solve this trafficking problem. And I also went into the tech and venture capital consulting space, and that led me to one of my current endeavors, my for-profit company, which is 10 Point Data, where we provide illicit commodity data to everybody from governments to industry partners, and then we build custom agentic AI platforms to be able to make sense of all of that data. So I went from shooter to computer nerd quite seamlessly, because at the end of the day, I was always just a big nerd.
That's that's awesome. Well, I will tell you that I'm jealous of the fact that you live where you live. I've only had the pleasure of coming out there one time. We're coming out again this summer for a little vacation. I would love to be able to have a place out there. It's an amazing place. But
It is.
before I get into all the things you're doing now, which I cannot wait for the audience to hear about, I want to touch basically, and whatever you can't talk about, I get it. Just if I ask you something and you can't say it, then just tell me. I know you will.
I'll let you know.
But as far as going into the Air Force, how does a kid from Montana even know about the PJs? Can you walk us through that? Because a lot of this audience knows about Navy SEALs, because I love to bust Carl's chops
Sure.
about every SEAL writes a book, or
Oh yeah.
You don't hear so much
It's phase
about some
three
of
of
the,
Buds, right?
what's that?
Book writing.
Yeah.
Phase three of Buds is book writing, right?
Yes, sir.
I love my SEAL brethren. They're great, and the in the special ops community, we all rib each other, and the Air Force is better than Navy, Navy's better than the Air Force. Everyone's better than the Marine Corps, the Army. I mean, we all rib each other. But at the end of the day, the reality is all of those programs, whether it's Special Forces, SEALs, Marine Raider, MARSOC, Force Recon, whatever they're calling themselves these days, Combat Control, the Ranger Battalion. These are all great, and I'm sure, obviously, I've forgot some, but they're all great programs. Great men and women serving in all of them. The reality is that most of the people who made it through one of those programs probably would have made it through any other one. So, hats off to all the folks who not only served in all capacities, to include like you in the Secret Service, our law enforcement heroes that are out there protecting us while we were overseas. I mean, everyone's doing their part. So let me just put that off first and just say that, while we rib each other, these are incredible programs, incredible people that are making really sacrificial choices to go into them. So the way that I wanted to become a pararescueman was very interesting. You very clearly remember the movie Navy SEALs from the early 90s. It was a really obviously testosterone filled movie, and any American male who watched that movie wanted to go be Charlie Sheen, right, in the tower and doing the cool operations and all that. And that was it. I mean, I was a kid from Montana, and I just wanted to do cool stuff. And so I originally wanted to go be a medic in the SEAL teams. I was a Air Force combat controller, or an Air Force combat controller, because I'd heard of those, but I'd never heard of pararescue. And the combat control thing I'd heard of, but it's the chair force, right? I mean, there's no way there's something cool that's happening there. And I didn't think I really wanted to be a pilot. So I went to the Navy recruiter and started talking to them about being a SEAL, and they couldn't guarantee me being a medic. And I had been a ski patroller in high school, and I really liked the wilderness aspect. I liked the skiing and the rope stuff that we were doing, and the emergency medicine stuff. And so I decided I want to be a medic, and the SEAL teams couldn't guarantee me a slot for a medic. And I figured, well, I'd at least try once I got in. And then the Air Force recruiter came in, and he was always trying to kind of hijack me in the halls and say, hey, have you've been everywhere else, why haven't you gone to go see the Air Force? I'm like, well, because what's the chair force have to offer, right? I'm not really interested in that. And then he started telling me about pararescue, and I was kind of like, I'm not really interested in it. Well, then my mom happens to bring up, like, my parents had finally figured out that, all right, Nick's not going to go to college. He's going to go into the military. We may as well at least help him try to get the right job in the military. So my mom ended up bringing home a recruiting brochure from pararescue. And anybody who's seen this recruiting brochure knows what I'm talking about. It's got Mike Maltz, who actually later ended up being my supervisor. It was my first supervisor, but he's on the, he's this on the cover. He's this real square jawed guy, and just kind of looks like Captain America. And he's, got his beret on, and the recruiting brochure looked pretty cool. And I was looking through that and I saw, oh, well, pararescue actually does a lot in the mountains, and everybody's a medic. And I kind of thought about it a little bit, but still decided, well, how cool could that really be? And I was going back into the Navy recruiter's office to sign some paperwork, and I hadn't taken the ASVAB yet. This is pretty early in my senior year of high school. So they were getting all those appointments set up, and then the Air Force recruiter saw me again, and he's like, hey, have you ever thought about pararescue? And I was like, I saw the brochure. It seemed really interesting, but it doesn't seem as cool as the SEALs. Because let's face it, the Navy has their marketing on point, right? I mean, with the TV shows and the movies, and none of which are actually based in reality, like, their marketing is really good. And so then the recruiter for the Air Force said these magic words. He said, you probably wouldn't make it anyway. And I was like, what? What do you mean I'm not going to make it anyway? Like, what are you talking about? It can't be harder than the SEALs. He was like, well, actually, it is. And he just went back into his office, and guess what? I followed him in there. And then he showed me their recruiting video. And one of the things that I liked about pararescue was that everybody was a paramedic. That was something you had to do. Everybody was a combat diver. Everybody got Halo. At the time, it was Air Force and pararescue and combat control were the only two special operations career fields where every single entry level operator got Halo school. And so I thought, oh, that's pretty cool. And in pararescue, every single operator was going to be a special operations combat medic and a civilian paramedic. I thought that was pretty cool. And then he started telling me about pararescue's civilian mission, because pararescue is the only special operations career field that has a standing civilian mission. So when you're not doing combat related stuff overseas, you're doing civilian rescue stuff at home. Most of that is either going to be in the ocean or it's going to be in the mountains. And in fact, I think to this day, the Alaska pararescue team still has the world record for the highest altitude rescue ever conducted. And so I thought, man, that's right up my alley. And so that's how I ended up finding out about pararescue and how I ended up joining.
That is incredible. I worked with a guy who was a combat controller, and I never knew much about it. Of course, I'm a little older than you are, so the internet wasn't really a thing for me for a long time. But I met this guy named Jerry, and I won't say his last name on here because I didn't talk to him and get permission. But he's a real cool guy, super squared away, and he was one of our instructors at Counter Assault Team, and that's when I kind of first learned about pararescue and different things like that. Just incredible. The mission set that you guys do is. I mean, I've seen a lot. I was a Secret Service agent. I've seen a lot and done a lot. But, when I was a kid, people like Michael Jordan and things like that would get me excited. Now I'm an old man and I don't get excited much. But when I talk to people like you,
sports ball,
first responders and the spec ops guys, that community, that whole, because I wasn't in the military and I highly regret it. You know what I mean? And I don't know if I would have made it through any of those courses, but I would have liked to have tried something. I didn't try anything just because I had a different path. So I just really look up to you guys, and I do mean this. I don't want it to sound tongue in cheek at all. I really do appreciate what you did for our country and what everybody out there does. We talked offline last time about we almost shared the same career field. So we're like-minded. I don't know if I had the skill sets or whatever to make it through. But anyway, we're both patriots in our own way, and I really appreciate you.
Well, hey, thank you. I remember, one of the things that you probably, it doesn't sound like you work directly with PJs when you're in the Secret Service, but PJs work with Secret Service a lot. In fact, my unit in Valdosta, Georgia was the standby rescue team for George W. Bush out on his ranch in Crawford, because he was always doing crazy mountain biking stuff, and the terrain out there was not really something that the Secret Service was really prepared for. And so the White House flight surgeon got a contingent of PJs that would always go with him to Crawford, Texas, to do the presidential detail. And that's just enough. Now, granted, we were unarmed because that was you guys' job, and we were just going to screw it up if you give PJs a bunch of guns and they're going to act like it's overseas. But that was that civilian rescue component that we were doing. And in fact, I think it was when President Bush wrecked his mountain bike. The first person to put hands on him was a pararescueman who was in the little mountain biking formation with a big med ruck on his back to actually treat the president. So yeah, PJs get to do some cool stuff, and it's a very, very varied mission. And that's really, really what I liked about it. It's not the best fit for everybody, but it was an amazing fit for me, and I don't regret it one bit.
Can you walk us through a little, and I know we're probably spending too much time on this, but I'm interested. This is for me. This is for my own edification right now. But what was the hardest thing that you kind of experienced through selection? What's selection like? Everybody kind of knows what BUDS is, and some people know about the Q course. What's kind of like the selection process like?
So the Air Force, so actually the Navy's selection process for the SEAL teams is actually based on the pararescue selection team, because pararescue goes back to 1945. It actually predates the creation of the United States Air Force. goes back to the Army Air Corps. And so the water-based selection process is something that is a differentiator, right? I mean, you look at like the SFQ course, incredible program, incredible men going through it, but it's a land-based program. And the thing about land-based programs is you can always run faster. You can always do another push-up. You can always push just a little bit harder. You can't do that in the water. So when you're doing the land-based stuff within pararescue, it's probably the same as what everybody else goes through. But when you talk the water stuff, right, and you're tying knots underwater and you're, getting kicked in a pool and doing drown proofing with your hands and feet tied behind your back and, 10 feet of water, it's it's a mind control thing. Like no amount of athleticism gets you through that. Because the reason why is we call water-based selection processes and the water in general is the great equalizer. Because if you're really fast, great, get in the pool. You're really strong, that's awesome, get in the pool. You're a really smart guy, get in the pool. All mammals, when you take away their air and put them underwater, react pretty much exactly the same, give or take about 10%, right? You can only hold your breath for so long. And when you start holding your breath underwater, then the question is, are you going to override the instinct to go to the surface and breathe and accomplish that task before you go breathe? Or are you going to let that instinct to survive drive you, and you're not going to accomplish the task and you're going to go to the surface and breathe? I mean, really, it's kind of that simple. And so you either keep your mind, and your wits about you, and you accomplish the task before you go, to the surface and fill your own need, or you don't. And really that's the biggest difference, is those water-based selection processes do have a way of increasing the attrition rate in ways that other land-only selection processes just don't. So the hardest part of pararescue is really just selection. I mean, it's that simple, because once selection is over, like I went through the U.S. Army's combat diver qualification course, right? The same one that Army SF goes to if you're going to be on a dive team. And the Army, that statistically, that is their highest attrition course. So when you go there, and I'm there as a PJ student, right? I'm a nobody. I'm a 19-year-old PJ student, and there's 2 Delta Force operators in my class. There's a bunch of SF guys. Probably 20% of the class was Rangers from the Ranger Battalion, and if they fail, they go back to the Ranger Battalion. They go back to SF. The Delta guys kind of had a ticket to walk. They let's just say they were treated a little different than by the instructors than the rest of us, but everybody else, like when they failed, and we lost a lot of guys in my scuba class, they go back to an ODA. They go back to the Ranger Battalion. And I'm sure they're probably going to get hazed, and they're probably going to, pay the man a little bit for failing the course. But everybody knows how hard that course is. Yeah. If you fail combat dive qualification as a PJ student, you don't get to go be a PJ. You're done. And so that was, but I will say that after going through PJ selection, the pool comp and all that stuff within combat dive was pretty easy. Yeah.
So did you find that to be an extra motivator? I mean, at that point, you're probably in it to win it anyway. There's no plan B. Like I've heard guys, the guys that wash out basically give themselves an out mentally, right? So I think most of the guys that make it, they're mentally tough, right? So was that extra motivation for you?
It really wasn't. I think people ask me about motivation. I think Jocko Willink says it best, where like motivation is worthless, right? Discipline is really the only thing that matters. But I would love to say that I was this hyper disciplined guy. I don't really think that was it either. And I don't think there's any secret mindset or anything like that. I think it all comes down to one thing. You just decide what it is that you're going to do, and you go do that. It's that simple. You make the decision, and like you said, when people give themselves a mental out, I think what happens is they haven't really made the decision. they've said, well, I think I want to go do this. I'm 90% sure I'm going to go do this. No, if you decide, that means you are 100% marching down this path, and you're either going to accomplish that or you're going to die. Like that is like death is the only plan B. And if that is truly your mindset and you have truly made that decision, well then, barring some very unfortunate circumstance, you break your leg, something, happens that doesn't allow you to continue training, as long as you don't get hurt, you're gonna make it. Like it's kind of that simple, which it sounds really trite to say, well, wait a minute, there's a 92% attrition rate within pararescue. I don't know what it is today. That's what it was when I was going through. So the 92% attrition rate. So only 8 out of 100 make it. And you're saying that these other 92 guys out of every 100 who didn't make it, they didn't actually decide that's what they wanted to do. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I'm saying. They didn't make the decision to say, you know what, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm either going to succeed or die. No, I think it's that simple.
No, I do.
At least for me.
No, I think you're right. I always like to ask those questions to people like yourselves because I didn't do it. But I think it is a mindset, right? This 6-inch space between our ears drives the train, and we have to control Absolutely. It, not let it control us. So anyway, thank you for walking us through that. I've always been very interested in that program. I've never really had anybody explain it, like you did. I have a lot of friends in the Spec Ops community, Rangers, and I know 1 or 2 Delta guys and some SEALs and SF guys, and I only know the one combat controller. So now I know you, and I just really appreciate you explaining that to us. Could you before we move on, could you walk us through maybe what's the difference between the op tempo and some of the mission sets that you guys had with the Air Force versus where you worked later?
So I think it depends on when you're talking. When I went through pararescue, we were the most deployed special operations component just because we were so small. So we were constantly farmed out to an ODA or a SEAL team or the Delta unit or SEAL Team 6 or the Secret Service or the DEA, or the Alaska PJ team, as an example, is farmed out a lot to the National Park Service to do rescues on Denali during the climbing season. You get PJs get farmed out to the U.S. Coast Guard because when and it's not really farmed out to the U.S. Coast Guard, but when a rescue is happening far enough outside off the land borders of the United States that the Coast Guard doesn't have the capability to get out far enough, well then usually the RCC, so the Rescue Coordination Center for the U.S., then taps the pararescue teams and hands the mission off to the Air Force rescue teams. So that's that. So the ops tempo was insane. There was a time in my PJ career where I was the second most deployed person in the Air Force. The most deployed person in the Air Force was actually one of my teammates, a guy named Mike. We were just, you could always deploy, assuming that you had met all the standards and you'd met all the training requirements that you were supposed to meet, and you were operational and you weren't hurt, which luckily I got hurt quite a few times in pararescue, but I was still able to deploy a lot. So Operation Southern Watch, Northern Watch, Olive Branch, Operation Desert Fox, Operation Desert Thunder, all of those were primarily Air Force-based operations because there were jets going into Northern Iraq, Southern Iraq, right, enforcing the no-fly zones with that Saddam was constantly breaching. And so the first time I ever saw combat, and when I define combat, I mean you are actively receiving incoming fire from an enemy, right? And then you are engaging. That was in 1998, and that was in Southern Iraq. And we were coming out of Kuwait going into Southern Iraq. And so, and then same thing coming out of Southern Turkey into Northern Iraq. So we were very focused on those operations, and oftentimes we were the only ground component in the area Sometimes we had some SAS guys with us, which was interesting. And then we would oftentimes have a SEAL team or an ODA or somebody who was sitting as a quick reaction force to come get us if or come, supplement firepower, so to speak, if things got too hairy. But we never had to call on them. And so I think it was Operation Desert Fox. PJs were the only folks on the ground in southern Iraq, and we were the only people in punching into Iraqi airspace, and the Navy guys were sitting at I can't remember, I think it was Camp Doha, waiting for the call to come supplement with firepower if something happened. So the ops tempo back then was pretty incredible. And then I know during the GWAT, the ops tempo just picked up. It was just PJs were just constantly gone. But it also did show some real problems with the way that the military had really kind of, the soft community kind of become to over rely on the PJs. And so you had TF-160 stood up their own kind of aeromedical combat medic support. And then, ODAs had always had their 18 Deltas, which are incredible combat medics. And the SEALs had always had their combat medics as well. But then the Ranger Battalion kind of took their combat medic program up to a whole new program. And so it really allowed other people to start kind of taking some of the load.
So sorry if this is a silly question, but I need to ask it because I'm not sure I quite understood one of the things you said. So as a pararescue guy, were you deployed as a unit with just your guys, or were you guys always augmented to different groups? Sorry if I missed that.
No, it depended. Sometimes you were embedded with an ODA or a SEAL team, CAG, SEAL Team 6. I mean, it really just depended. Or sometimes we were just our own
Gotcha.
element. So if it was a rescue specific mission, it was our own element. Sometimes we had a combat controller with us, sometimes not. And then if it was somebody else's mission, then we would embed with them.
Gotcha.
So it really depended on what was going on in that specific theater where we were at.
So when you say rescue, did that also entail like hostage rescue type stuff, or was it like other more medical related?
Oh no, hostage rescue too. I mean, you look at the Jessica Lynch rescues, great example. Shout out to T-Dog, was the PJ from the 24th STS who was embedded with that special ops unit that rescued her. And there's a pretty famous picture of her when she got to the first medical treatment in the rear, and you actually see T-Dog standing there, and you can see his little PJ patch on his shoulder, sitting there with Jessica Lynch. That's great. So pretty much, I mean, if there were PJs on the Bin Laden raid, there were PJs on the al-Baghdadi raid. There's PJs on pretty much anything that, anything of substance. The Captain Phillips, right? Shout out to Chad. First SEAL team into Afghanistan. It was a Damneck team. And that was Ray Colon Lopez, who then went on to go be the most senior enlisted special operator in the DoD. I mean, so there's PJs are kind of always around. And I just, a lot of times, there's no markings or anything like that. And so when you see pictures and stuff of say, combat operation going on somewhere, there's usually a PJ in the mix somewhere.
Yep. That's good. And this next question is not meant to be anything other than what it is. I know that you guys like to bust chops. We talked a while ago about, just in fun, like we're better than you, because the Secret Service, like FBI, Secret Service, the whole thing, I get it, right? Firemen and police, it's in good fun. But having said that, in real terms, were you guys pretty welcomed into each one of these communities? Because I have a couple of friends that they weren't PJs, they were like SF guys, and they would augment different groups, and they would say, well, this group was better than that, but I always felt like they were kind of jaded because of maybe where they worked, the big army or whatever. But Um, were you guys always pretty welcomed in as one of the group, like say with the SAS or Dev Group or CAG? Like did
Oh God, no,
egos ever get in the way,
no.
and to the point where they weren't
So
professional or?
not not so much egos. It's just that when you have, like, let's say an ODA, right? These guys live, eat, and breathe together for years before somebody cycles off to
Yep.
someplace else,
Yep.
and then they get a new guy
Mm-hmm.
into that ODA, and they don't trust that new guy. He's a Green Beret. He's in the Army. He's been through the same initial training they have, but he's the new guy. They don't trust him. They don't know him. And so it's kind of the same thing within pararescue. And it's a blessing and a curse. But the blessing of it was that as a PJ, you were highly motivated to be on your game.
Uh-huh.
You knew that you had to show up and you had to be just as fast, just as strong, just as good on the gun, and you had to be highly competent at your job so that you could earn the trust. And it does have to be earned.
Uh-huh.
You could earn the trust of that ODA that you were embedded with or whatever, right? And so you show up and guess what? You're the new guy. And they don't care that you've got all this cool guy training and you've done all this stuff. It's just, you're the new guy. And then they start training with you and you perform well. And of course you're going to make mistakes like anybody else, but you perform well. You're performing at the top of the stack. And then they're like, all right, this guy's okay. And then by about the end of the deployment, let's say, you're deployed for 4 months. By the end of that deployment, they're like, all right, Air Force, you're pretty good. And you're kind of very much, welcomed in. And then deployment's over, you rip out and you go home, reconstitute. And now you're back with another team. And guess what? You're with a different team. You're the Air Force. You're the new guy all over again. So there was a lot of motivation to never get complacent, because you knew that you were going to constantly be evaluated. And the PJ teams at the time, obviously I don't know today, but at the time they kind of ran the same way. I mean, my team leader would routinely just say, okay, we're going to go do an external jugular today. What? That's a pretty advanced medical procedure. And we'd be sitting on the grass outside the pull-up bar, and in case people started bleeding, and or somebody did it wrong, and you're spurting blood out of your external jugular, because that's a central line, and they would. I mean, it was just one of those things. Like, we're gonna go do EJ training today on each other.
Oh.
Like, we're gonna go stick needles in our jugulars. Right, and the flight surgeon would be there for basically emergency medical support, just in case somebody really screwed something up. And there you are, you're doing things that, like, you can kill people in training. And so you were expected on any given day your team leader would say, okay, today we're going to go do whatever it is, house runs. We're going to go do this medical training. We're going to go do some, free fall training. We're going to wherever for a week, and we're going to do, 100 jumps in a week, or we're going to go do this dive operation, or we're going to do a full mission profile training operation. I mean, any given day, you didn't necessarily know what you were going to be tapped to do that day. Oftentimes you did if you were in a training cycle, but if you were in a training cycle, you're in a down cycle, be like, hey, you're going to go do AIEs with this new guy, alternate insertion extraction methods. You're going to go do AIE training with this new guy. And you better be able to perform, because if you couldn't, then that was going to be a black mark on you, and then you're going to have remedial training, and then you may not get to deploy. And for me as a PJ, I was always volunteering. Like, if there was a deployment coming up, like, oh, got to go to, Kuwait. This is pre-GWAT. You're launching out of places like Kuwait. You're going to go to Kuwait to sit alert over Christmas. Sign me up. I mean, I was constantly volunteering for deployments, and so that's why I ended up doing 14 deployments in such a short period of time.
Now, were you married at this time, or at what point in your career did you get married, and how did that affect? Because a lot of people watching this struggle with the work-life balance, and I know your faith is probably what got you through a lot of this stuff. But being married in this type of job is not easy. Can you say anything that would maybe help somebody that might be struggling with that? How did you cope?
I was not married at the time. So I didn't get married first time until I was about 6 months away from exiting the Air Force.
Okay. So you were in it to win it. You had no restrictions. You were gone.
I was gone.
Yeah.
It was, I mean, one year I was just over 300 days
Yeah.
deployed.
What
Yeah.
did
And there was a guy on my team who was he beat me by like 5 days or something like that. It was like 305 days or something along those lines. And yeah, he was the most deployed person in the United States Air Force, and I was the second most. And we got in trouble from the Air Force. The Air Force actually like, sent somebody from headquarters down to our team in Valdosta, Georgia, to talk to my team chief about like, why are these guys gone so much? And I was like, well, like, you keep sending us stuff to do. Someone's got to fill those slots.
Yeah.
And these guys, aren't married and don't have kids. But I did, because I wasn't married and I didn't have kids. I was, figured out how to find somebody to take care of my dog. I kind of almost looked at it as it was an opportunity as a single guy to get all this experience, because I did realize that a lot of the married guys who had kids needed to be spending more time at home.
Yep.
And I didn't. So,
Yep.
And plus every time you're gone, all your pay is tax free. You're getting all these extra pays. So it was also an opportunity to get paid more.
Yeah.
Why not?
No, that's awesome. So so let's transition right over then into kind of, what made you decide, okay, it's time to get out. I know you said you went in the private sector for a while. Had you had an opportunity to work with the agency while you were in? I know you worked with a bunch of different DoD people, but did that kind of get the bug there, or?
Yeah, I right after September 11th was part of one of the task forces that left the country. Can't get into the details of it, but ended up working with some agency guys. At least we were told they were agency guys. It turned out they were JSOC dudes who had been detailed to the agency. But I didn't know that. They were running and gunning and doing some pretty cool stuff. And I started talking to some of the other agency guys who weren't part of the JSOC team, and they were kind of explaining the way that they saw the agency. So the difference here is, like, in pararescue, really, you only have a job when things go really wrong, right? Things go wrong, you're the guy that people look to. At the CIA, a lot of people don't realize, is actually prevention. So what the CIA is trying to do is what we call keeping butts out of seats. And those seats are F-16s and tanks, and right. So really the military, the big mill, and large military operations are only going when the Central Intelligence Agency has failed at its mission of keeping things from ever escalating into a need for the larger military. And I'm obviously paraphrasing and oversimplifying significantly, but that was my mindset. And so I just thought, wait a minute, I've done all this work on, essentially crisis mitigation. Now I want to go try the crisis prevention side. And the whole concept of sneaking around and not getting caught was something that I really liked. The Air Force sent me to a covert breaching school, which is basically just a fancy word of saying, like, learning how to, pick locks and things like that. And so I, in going through that school, there was a bunch of other military guys in there, some law enforcement dudes in there too, from the Bureau. And I thought that was a lot of fun. And so in my mind, that's what the agency was doing all the time. And so I thought, hey, I want to go try that. And so but I didn't really know how to do that until one day I just got a phone call that said, hey, we'd like you to try out for a program. Can't tell you what it is. But if you're interested, this is what we need you to do. And if you ever get a phone call where it's like, hey, we want you to try out for a program, but we can't tell you what it is, the answer is always yes. Like, I don't care who you are. If you're a red-blooded American male, right? The answer is yes. I'm gonna go try that out. And so I did.
Nick, I keep waiting for that phone call. It hasn't ever come.
I don't plant too
Oh,
many trees in my backyard, right? Because
uh,
I've seen Rambo. Like I keep waiting for Colonel Kurt to, show up on that Huey, right? I mean, I got a
so good.
landing zone out in my out behind
Uh,
my house. It's all safe. They can land that Huey and have the Colonel come out and ask me to get back in.
that'd be so good. I'd go back. I don't. I mean, I'm a little past my prime now, but I would go. I mean, we talked about it on our phone call how I turned down. It was, and this is not my interview, so I don't want to talk about it much. But like, it was the hardest thing I've ever said no to professionally. Like, I went with my head, not my heart, and I don't regret it now. But I mean, I wrestled.
Yeah. I mean, I get asked a lot, like, do you miss the agency? I'm like, oh, every day. But the reality is I miss wartime CIA and GWAT's over. And so what did they do? They just replaced me with a younger, faster, stronger, smarter version. And I liked being on the dirt circuit, right?
Uh-huh.
At the agency, I had an opportunity to go transition to another career field, which would have been a lot of, you know, time in Paris and time in Austria and time in Lebanon or whatever. And I really liked the dirt circuit. When I was at the agency, I never did a headquarters assignment and I never did a flagpole assignment in any of the countries I was in. I was always out, well, with one exception. Um, I was always out in a fob. I
Uh-huh.
wanted to be as far away from the flagpole and
Uh-huh.
as in the fight as I could get.
Yeah.
And so I would always volunteer for, kind of the place where the living conditions weren't awesome and the food sucked. That was right where I wanted to be.
Yeah. Oh man, after my own heart. It just wasn't meant to be for me, but that's okay. So, my wife's back there grinning because she's pretty sure she's glad that didn't happen. So, yeah, the dirt circuit. That sounds like that would have been right up my alley. But anyway, moving along. So, you had your time with well, you had your career with the Air Force, and then you had your time over the agency. At the beginning, you had talked about. Doing something different. I forget exactly what you said you did with the private sector. Was there a gap in service, or did you just transition right from the Air Force over to the agency, and then you started your other stuff?
No, there was a gap in service because I wanted to try some business. I started working for a startup in Boston doing private personnel recovery, and then that very quickly turned into just solving problems for primarily private equity and primarily private equity and banks. And so and insurance companies. And so I started doing that. But at the same time, I left that rather abruptly. Had a lot of values misalignment with the CEO of that company. And I ended up doing about a 6-month stint in Hollywood, which is pretty funny because I'm about the least Hollywood guy there is. And the whole time I was just waiting for my CIA clearance to go through because the CIA, like if you have a top secret security clearance in the military, like the CIA doesn't care. They start from scratch. They do all their own security clearances and they redo them from scratch. So because I traveled so much internationally, that was a relatively long process to get my clearance back up. But then once I got re-cleared by them, then it was on.
Yeah. So, what did you do in Hollywood? Do you care to talk any funny stories from Hollywood?
I got all kinds of funny stories, but I also have like I don't know. I just wasn't impressed.
Yeah.
I was I'm still very good friends with very recognizable A-list actors, but they're just friends.
Yeah.
They're like I don't care that
Yeah.
they're actors or whatever. They're
Yeah.
just cool dudes that I got along with.
Yep.
But they turned out to be kind of the exception. The rest
Uh-huh.
of the Hollywood community just wasn't really. It just wasn't. I wasn't a good fit for it.
Yeah.
I'm not somebody who's real outgoing. I'm pretty introverted, and so that's just not really what Hollywood wants to see.
Uh-huh.
And I wasn't trying to make things cooler than they are. I'm just not a good fit for Hollywood.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well,
And there's a lot of values misalignment between my personal values and the way that Hollywood conducts themselves.
well, the fact that you don't fit in Hollywood's a good thing. So we'll leave it at that.
I think so.
Yeah. So moving along from Hollywood, Is there a mission, and obviously there's probably more than one, is there a mission specific thing that you think of from time to time, like whether it was as a PJ or with the agency that sticks out? Is there anything, a mission where you had to, I don't know, rescue somebody, or you were being more, instead of being defensive, you were being more offensive? Is there anything that sticks out in your mind that you could share with the audience?
So the one everybody always asks me, what's the scariest thing you did, right? Uh, Getting shot at isn't actually all that scary. It can be, but usually it's not, because especially back then the bad guys just weren't that good, and they didn't have some of the technical advantages that they have now. You look at like the drone wars in Ukraine and stuff like that. Like that's terrifying. I mean, I never had to deal with drones with little bombs on them that people were trying to hunt me down with. But when people ask me, there's actually there's the hardest and then there's the scariest. Both of those were actually civilian operations in the mountains, and the reason that those can be so hard and so scary is because you can't control the environment in the mountain. I mean, right? I mean, if the mountain is trying to kill you, what are you going to do? Shoot back at the mountain, right? I mean, it's literally a game of wits and chess between you and the mountain. And so I can think of, like, physically the hardest. We carried a 200 plus pound man out of the mountains over. It was just over 17 miles, I think. And where he was right at around 10,000 feet. And we brought him all the way down to about 5,000 feet before we could finally get him to a civilian team that could get him into an ambulance and get him to some medical care. And that was a level of physical exhaustion that I actually hadn't experienced since I was in PJ school. And at this point, I was actually an instructor at PJ school. And then there's another one that I did where I was Fire and Rescue Magazine's Rescue of the Year, because it was a climber who had his arm trapped under this massive boulder. I mean, I don't know how big it was. I mean, how heavy it was, but it was so heavy that the rope systems that we had that were pulling on the boulder to pull it up, and then we had airbags underneath it that we were using to try to push it up at the same time. And we'd humped all this gear in there. The knots on the ropes started getting little trails of smoke coming out of them. And you hear about that in training. What that means is that you're starting to exceed the plastic strength of the rope. And so this rope was holding this boulder. We used these airbags to get it up, but then the airbags rolled out. We're on the side of a cliff, and this boulder is just kind of moving. And we'd given this guy an IV on the side of a cliff. And so we had, all these IV lines and, IV bags that we'd stuffed in his shirt, and because of the amount of friction that there was, and we didn't have, we don't have tons and tons of gear that you can bring into the backcountry like that. And there was only probably, I don't know, 7 of us. We didn't have enough weight on the system to be able to get to get both people off the cliff. And I'd kind of taken charge of this whole scene, and I ended up not being roped into anything, but also, like, it wasn't that dangerous. I was pretty confident in my abilities. I ended up stepping out and grabbing onto the rope, not tied into anything, and getting onto the rope and actually holding on and pushing us away from the rock, and then going down with the rope, not tied into it, while this 10,000 plus pound boulder is just sitting there, just kind of swinging a little bit. And you can hear the when knots start to reach their plastic breaking strength, they start snapping. It's like this. It almost sounds like a cap gun. And so these ropes are snapping, and I'm I know what's going on. I was a subject matter expert for rope rescue and vertical access for the Air Force. for the PJ team. So I very, very clearly understood what was going on. And we had this very small window of time in order to get this guy off this cliff face before we were all going to get crushed to death. And those are examples of like where, you know, when someone's shooting at you, you can shoot back. You can maneuver on that person. Like you can call in aircraft. You have a lot of options. When you're in the mountains with just a few dudes and you're on the side of a cliff, not tied in to with the 10,000 pound boulder, getting ready to crush everybody. And if that boulder would have went, it would have killed us all. And you're trying to get that all done within a time frame that you don't actually know what it is.
Yeah.
Do you have another 30 seconds? Do you have another 90 seconds? Do you have 120 seconds? I don't know. And at this point, my career, I mean, I'd had, you know, Halo parachutes that don't open, not a big deal. You get your reserve out, you know, been shot at. I mean, and that was the very first time where I was like, oh, I'd been in party to 3 helicopter crashes. And first helicopter crash, I thought we might not make it. And we did. But the helicopters are just designed for that. But that was the first time where I was like, oh, like if this boulder goes, I'm for sure going to die. Like for sure that's going to happen. And I don't know if that's going to happen in 5 seconds or if that's going to happen in 50 seconds, but we're going to try our best to get this guy out of here. And we did. And the boulder ended up, they ended up being able to set the boulder down. And it ended up moving in ways that we didn't want it to. And it ended up sending all these, as it did, it sent all these little rocks that would break off of it, right? Little fragments of that boulder would break off of it. And they would, I mean, it sounded like gunfire when they were going by your head, right? There's this sound you probably know about, like when you have rounds that are incoming that are going past you, right? The way that snapping sound, that was from little shards coming off of this boulder as it moved. Luckily we'd found a little spot in the bottom of this ravine and we were just hunkered down and we were fine, but we're like you can see these little pieces of rock just snapping off the rocks around us. And that was actually probably the scariest rescue I ever did, where I was like, wow, like there's no margin, not just for error. There's no margin at all here, even for time.
How did a guy like that with his arm stuck, how the heck did he call for help? Did he have like a sat phone or something, or?
No, a hiker came up on him. So he was solo climbing, dumb. He was solo climbing and he was on this cliff and he was, you know, reached in to kind of do, you know, kind of what's called an arm jam in this crack. And as he did, this massive boulder kind of like slipped and there was little like gravel underneath it that kept it from completely crushing his arm. And meanwhile, also we had they were flying in a surgeon from a local hospital, and he was going to amputate this guy's arm on the side of the cliff. Surgeon was a civilian climber, and so when we got handed this mission, this guy had already been there for hours. He'd already had compartment syndrome. He was in a very, very bad shape, but our mission was not to save this guy's life. Our mission was to save this guy's arm. And so that was where like, we will roger that. We're going to save this guy's arm. And we took massive risks in order to do it, but we did it. Was it the right decision? It all worked out. So yes.
What, I know you know this because this is your world. What was the guy, when was the story of the guy that very similar and he cut his own arm off? That's a true thing. That wasn't some urban legend, right? I mean, I'm sure that's probably happened more than one time.
No, that was true. Same thing. Guy climbing by himself, got his arm stuck and had to cut off his own arm to survive. And I mean, in those situations, you gotta do what you gotta do.
What did he do it like at the elbow, or you know where he did it?
Oh,
at?
Yeah. No, I don't know.
Oh, it's horrible.
I think I read an article in Outside Magazine about that probably, 20 years ago.
Yeah, that's wild. Well, listen, I know our time's coming up close to ending here, but before we go, Please, if it's okay with you, I'll link your stuff in
Please.
the podcast. Will you please just tell the people what you're doing now with DeliverFund and what the Lord has called you into doing?
Sure. So, long story short, ended up bumping into some child trafficking when I was overseas, and just figured that there was a version of me doing something about that. I mean, you were in law enforcement for how many years, and yet who's got the ball on the human trafficking issue? And that's nobody. And that's what I learned when I was overseas. I mean, you got great men and women in the DOJ and who are doing their best, but there's just not very many of them.
Yeah.
And I'm an economics nerd at the end of the day and a tech nerd. And so when I started looking at the human trafficking issue in America, I realized it's an illicit commodity, right? Children are an illicit commodity. They're sold on a black market. We understand the economics of that pretty well. And so I came up with this theory that I call 10 points of disruption, and we'll get you a link. You can just go to my website, Nic McKinley, nicmckinley.com/10 points. And I explained this. But my whole theory was that, well, we can actually use counterterrorism techniques that we were doing on the data and AI side to help law enforcement with the data and tech problem. And then we could equip them with data and tech. We could train them in a concept I came up with called the target-centric analysis method, which is just a fancy way of saying, like, how do you use data to find a bad guy, and then we could advise them with intelligence support. And so DeliverFund is a completely donor-funded company that provides intelligence on human traffickers to law enforcement for free. We currently distribute our data to over 7,000 law enforcement agencies across the United States for free, thanks to the generosity of donors. And then we have targeting analysts, right, intelligence analysts that are embedded with law enforcement around the country, and their salaries and benefits are paid for by donors, and they do targeting work for law enforcement to help them be able to find traffickers, and so that the law enforcement can go do what only law enforcement can do, and that is, go point guns at bad guys and put handcuffs on them. And so that was really a calling. Even my for-profit companies, they all contribute back to the charity work that we do at DeliverFund, which is to help law enforcement protect our kids. Because I see so many and talk to so many dads who are like, especially dads of daughters, who are like, I have all these guns and I have these cool locks and I got a Malinois and I got all this. I'm like, yeah, cool. Your daughter's in her room on a smartphone that you don't know she has on the neighbor's Wi-Fi signal, chatting with a human trafficker right under your roof. Your guns do nothing for you. Your Malinois does nothing for you. The locks on your door aren't even important, because that trafficker is doing a digital home invasion. And that's the problem that we help law enforcement solve, because law enforcement, and we do that through my for-profit company. We help industry partners do that as well. But really, at the end of the day, the going after the human trafficker is something that only law enforcement can do. And so why wouldn't we be all in helping those men and women in law enforcement do that work at speed and scale?
Yeah.
And so thanks to the generosity of the donors to DeliverFund, that's what we're able to do. And so far, over the last 10 years, we have a 100% conviction rate on every case we've been involved in that's gone to court. No prosecutor has screwed that up yet. And it's because the digital evidence and the digital data that we provide is so good.
Yeah.
Right. The digital target packages that we provide. And then, so not only do we do that, but then we have training on our website that we provide to law enforcement, so that we can train law enforcement at speed and scale. But then we also have training that we provide to just your average everyday civilian as well, all through our website at deliverfund.org.
So is everything, first of all, it's amazing because we've talked about it before and I've looked it up. It's absolutely amazing. So thank you again for doing that. I know that's where I think I'm headed. I'm not sure exactly what that looks like for me yet, but that's been bothering me for a while. And I'm going to be figuring that out in the next chapter of my life. But Do you guys do anything? Do you come out? Do you guys go do speeches, or is there like is it pretty much all web based, or do you guys do things in person? Or
So our law enforcement support is a combination of remote support and actual physically embedding in human trafficking task forces.
uh
So we do that. We do events all around the country where we speak on the human trafficking issue. We have more data, more counter human trafficking data as it applies to the United States of America than the Department of Justice does. I mean, we have the largest counter human trafficking database on the planet. So what we say in regards to trafficking is backed by data. It's not opinions. It's not some study coming out of some university that had some type of funding that maybe made them skew the data a little bit. No, we're looking at the actual data, and it's the data that traffickers are putting on the web, and we are using that data to not only help law enforcement find traffickers, but then also to help the public understand what the trafficking problem looks like in America. And it's a whole lot worse than anybody realizes.
yeah, and this is going to be my last question for you, and I mean no disrespect to my brothers and sisters in law enforcement because I've done this job for 30 years in 3 different outfits: sheriff's office, a police department, and federal government. So I've seen great work. I was a part of ICAC when I was with Secret
Oh yeah.
Service and stuff like that. So there's some really good work, and HSI does good work. They really do.
Oh yeah.
HSI does good in Bureau too, and Secret Service, believe it or not, they're very good. But do you think? And again, not knocking them, they're just overburdened. Do you think it's going to be people like yourself and Tim Tebow and Victor Marks and people like that out here doing sort of the grassroots stuff? Is that going to? I mean, obviously, it's helping, but do you think that's the way forward?
The way forward is actually industry partners. I mean, if Instagram would make it so the trafficker can never talk to the 14-year-old girl in the first place, then the problem's solved. So the biggest thing that we need to solve is for our industry partners, and that's what we do through my company, 10 Point Data. But ultimately, it's going to be that public-private partnership. I mean, the best example is the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, right? National Center for Missing and Exploited Children is a private nonprofit. So yet they work so closely with law enforcement, and they have for the last 30 years, that the reason that we find missing kids is because they're helping law enforcement with those cases. And I was fortunate enough to have John Walsh, who founded Nic McKinley, kind of mentor me in starting DeliverFund. And that's why we were able to kind of do it right from the beginning. So I think the public-private partnerships are extremely important. I get real irritated at the guys with my kind of background who think that they're going to go play cop for an evening, and they're like, oh, we're going to go rescue victims from hotel rooms. Like, no, you're not. That's called committing a felony. So either you're not actually doing it or you're committing felonies. Either way, I'm not going to support you. It's law enforcement actually doing the rescue of the victims. It's law enforcement actually taking out the traffickers, right? Arresting them and holding them accountable. But what they need is all the boring work, right? They need data, they need technology, they need intelligence support. And so that's what we provide at DeliverFund. And we do it at a scale that's far beyond anything I ever could have imagined.
Well, I think it's amazing, and I've already passed your information along to some friends of mine, so hopefully they'll do the right thing and look you guys up. So again, it's an awesome interview, man. Thank you. I'm so glad that a mutual friend of ours introduced us. I really have been looking forward to this. I know it's going to be exciting for people to watch, and I just really appreciate your time, Nic.
Well, thanks, Scott. Appreciate you having me on.
Okay, buddy. Take care.